Now.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us on March 6, 2022. We all have been consumed with the news, and specifically Greg has been all over being interviewed on what is happening. Where I sit in ICANN, we had a specific and interesting request, and President of Ukraine asked, I think, all tech giants to help them. So the request from ICANN was to shut down Russian internet altogether. There was a emergency meeting, and the result was ICANN cannot do it even if they want to, because the network is distributed and decentralized, and it's not that easy to do it. But more importantly, ICANN, as guardian of internet, wants to remain non-partisan and therefore to prevent a splinternet. So the decision was that they cannot fulfill the request, but they can try to help Ukraine as much as they can to make sure the infrastructure is intact, and in other ways trying to help them with domain name registration, keeping them, automatically renewing them, waiving the fees, and things of that nature, which really is not much of help at the end. I know Elon Musk tried to help. Elon Musk sent some star, I think something, helping them through satellites to remain connected to internet. Other tech giants each tried to do something. I asked Talia to investigate the whole thing. Unfortunately, she's not here to tell us what she found out, but nevertheless, I think tech giants are trying to play a role but I don't think anybody could make a meaningful difference. So I think maybe Greg has some interesting insights. Greg, do you want to take over?
Sure. I did a presentation last week in which I talked about what I got wrong, basically. Interestingly, my former colleagues in intelligence got it right and I got it wrong. I had thought all along that it made no sense for Putin to make a big invasion. Mm-hmm. It still doesn't make any sense to me. But I was misled by that. I was doing too much mirror imaging, imagining if I were Putin, the last thing I would have done was invade Ukraine en masse. But obviously my former colleagues were looking at the troop movements and noticing that 190,000 troops, including troops moved from Vladivostok, from far away, that was way more than Putin needed to create a bargaining chip to deal with NATO, that he must have an invasion in mind. So they got it right, and unhappily, they got it right and I got it wrong. And now I don't know. Now it's hard to see an off-ramp, as they say, for Putin in the current circumstances. He keeps sort of doubling down, but it seems to me the best he can hope for now is to install some sort of puppet government in Kiev, but he'll continue to face an insurgency, and a pretty impressive one, it seems, so far. And now there's talk of the NATO countries sending old Russian fighter jets to Ukraine, ones that the Ukrainians could already fly. So it looks to me like it's going to continue to be bloody, with the poor Ukrainians doing most of the fighting and dying. And I don't know what it means in the end. It seems to me this can only end badly for Putin. I don't see a good outcome for him. But I'd be interested in other people's thoughts at this point.
Yeah, I think I posed a question to you earlier today, and I really, at the time that everybody regards the Ukrainian president as a hero, I wonder to what extent he could have led the country in a way that doesn't antagonize Russia, and perhaps different if it was a more experienced diplomat, a politician, could have prevented this bloody end that we are seeing, because I don't see way out for Ukraine. You say there is no way out for Putin as well, and I agree. But at the same time, Ukraine also is destroyed, has paid such a huge cost and continues paying it. So it's a very sad actual scenario. And I wonder that if he could have with different politics prevent what has happened. Anybody has any comment?
I think the only thing he could have done, go ahead, Puran.
Sorry, Greg. I mean, please go ahead, Greg.
No.
Please go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I was going to say about the only thing he could have done, it seems to me, is if he'd surrendered. But then who knows whether he would have lost control of the country in any case, because it looks like the Ukrainians really, don't want to be occupied by Soviet troops, and whether it's done peacefully or not peacefully, it seems to me it wasn't going to happen. Puran, sorry.
I mean, I would like to say the following, Pari. I mean, I have worked both with Ukrainians and Russians and Europe, and I can tell you something. It's a very complex relationship between the two. Russians always try to put Ukrainians down. They look upon them as second-grade citizens and people, and they find Ukrainians to be very close to Europe and Americans and everybody else. So part of the problem has been this very convoluted, complex, and very distraught kind of relationship between Russians and Ukrainians. And these people, I mean, both privately and in public as well, that kind of a thing plays out pretty well. So Russians have never taken Ukrainians going the other way, and it became quite open when Ukraine was public in terms of going to, Europe and NATO and all of that. I think the part of the problem begins from there. And then whatever Russians were doing, everyone was looking the other way. I mean, look at how the whole thing began to play out since Clinton's presidency, and then Bush, then Obama, then everybody else. I mean, I think Biden has taken a very firm decision to put very severe sanctions and escalate the cost on Russians for what they've been doing now. Now, the problem is, and I completely agree with you, Pari, I mean, this president of Ukraine would have bought some more time by, some way, diplomacy, being subservient a little bit. He would have bought some more time, and the time he would have used to become a member of EU and NATO and everything else, because Russians would not take anyone expanding eastwards any further. And they won't really convert Ukraine now, since they have begun to roll on their tank and everything. They will really try to convert Ukraine into some kind of a buffer zone between Russia on the one hand and eastern part of Europe. And my feeling is, I mean, I may be completely wrong, in Putin's diary or dictionary, there is no reverse gear. I mean, you can see what he did in Chechnya, what he did in Syria, what he did everywhere else. His tanks are not really going to stop until he either puts his own man in Ukraine, which is friendly to Kremlin, or something else happens. So Ukraine will be in a bad shape, while there'll be a very heavy cost and price for Putin to pay. And people are saying that some people within the core of Kremlin and very close to Putin are beginning to sort of tell him that, look, the cost is pretty high. We all are going to have a very difficult time because Putin has distributed his wealth through oligarchs and ultra-rich people. And if Biden succeeds and then ban on energy import, I mean, that could be the most crippling part of the sanctions if that could be really enforced, because in the past, whatever sanctions were put on Russia by the West, there were a lot of loopholes and they could play around it. And now they are being driven in the lap of Chinese. And my sense is Iran Russia, China, and North Korea.
Mhm.
They will all combine together and try to create a lot of problem for most of quote unquote democratic countries. And my fear is this war between the two sides will not really escalate and somehow becomes NATO, Russia, NATO, Russia, and EU. And then
Yeah.
America will get drawn into it and then it might have possibility of spreading. And now what is really going to happen is, as Greg said so rightly, that Americans are really going to replenish, the number of fighters, jet fighters, which Poland is going to give to Ukraine
Mhm.
by American, war machine. So if Poland gives Russian-made, because pilots in Ukraine cannot fly American jets, and America cannot really do it directly. So they are really looking at Russian Hooters, which could be given to Ukrainians, and the pilots could fly it, in lieu of which Americans are going to give Poland, and they're going to replenish that number by giving Polish people some American jets. And so, I mean, it's a pretty complicated scenario.
Yeah.
And where India is also being, sort of asked to take sides, but we have not taken sides because, it's a pretty bad and complex place because we don't really want Russians and Chinese and Koreans and Iranians to come together and create a problem for India because India has not been a party to what Russians and Ukrainians are doing. Of course, we have criticized and we have not, but we have abstained from Security Council resolutions. So to me, it looks like it's not really going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah.
It's very, very bad for Ukraine and very heavy price on Putin. And the possibility could be both Putin and the president of Ukraine, they both could go and there could be two different people in the
That
place.
would be very nice. That's what we all would wish for. So, Eduardo, any comments?
Just a quick comment, since I know you guys probably know way more than I do about this, but
No.
I did want to add that as an anthropologist, one of the first things we do is we try to figure things out from the local perspective. And I'm working on a project now in Ukraine with the British embassy there. And I was surprised by how many Ukrainians are pro-Russia. There's a large portion of the population, I think far more than half, that are Russian-speaking Orthodox. And so this is really more of a civil war than an invasion. I thought that dynamic, which doesn't really get highlighted in the mainstream news, is an interesting one. And it sort of flips many of the conventional wisdom that we have here in the West on its head. That's all I wanted to add, just that civil war dimension, which kind of speaks, Greg, to what you were saying about that continuing as a frozen conflict for many decades to come.
Yeah, thank you, Eduardo. The number, half Russian speakers, that seems high to me. I think it's not that high, but we can look it up and see. Certainly in the East, where the Russians already have carved out some places, those are very much Russian speaking. They watch Russian TV, not Ukrainian TV. So they are very Russian. But it seems to me what's happened is Putin continues to, the more he pushes Ukraine west, not the outcome I think he seeks.
Yeah, and also I want to point out that the president of Ukraine is actually Russian-speaking Jew. I assume you all have heard.
Yes.
So the fact that they are Russian-speaking doesn't mean necessarily they're pro-Russia, but I agree with Eduardo, there's a large number, and this is true, that it is going to be a civil war. Maybe not equal, but then Russian help as well, but there is embedded interests and feelings invested in that. So yeah. So next thing I want to mention is we have been in touch with Korea's Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. So with the chairman of that organization, we will have an event at the end of March, which is about internet governance. I look forward to that. It seems it's going to be a 3 hours webinar for executives in a multi-stakeholder forum or venue. So that's one thing that we're working. The other thing was Talia did a very good research on women's status in China, which is becoming part of our China white paper. Greg wrote an article. Greg, do you want to talk about that a bit?
One of the things that intrigued me is the status of women in China. So I did some writing on that. Talia did some very good research, found some interesting things. And yeah, as you can imagine, it's a pretty mixed picture. Traditionally, philosophically, the Chinese think of men and women as kind of counterparts that fit together. But in fact, of course, there's been a lot of not suppression, but a lot lower status for women for a long, long time. And so it's a interesting history, interesting present. The Me Too movement, in some ways, only reinforced currents that were going on already in Chinese society. But there's still a fair amount of identifying women by their marital status in particular. So that it's like everywhere, I suppose they have a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so China paper is actually coming to be too comprehensive to be a white paper, and we are thinking maybe even we turn it to a book, because it's now about 200 pages of write-up, and increasingly it looks like a book. I don't know if Greg agrees or not, but yeah. I think we should reevaluate and see what we do. Beyond that, I don't have much to report, and if you guys have something you want to discuss, I haven't received your articles. Puran, I look forward to receive them. In fact, this week I have been publishing some of the past articles we had, which we didn't have time to publish. Some of the interviews we had, still I'm going to spend a couple of hours to finalize that. So if you send it to me, I can publish yours. And if there is anything else anyone wants to discuss, please take the floor.
I would like to comment pretty quickly, Pari. You know, I had some laptop problem, and which has been set. So at the earliest, time, sure. Maybe in a day or two, you get both. I mean, I just wanted to go over both the articles and see that everything's fine, so that I could probably send you two at a time, so that, there could be some, consideration. If there is still anything you would advise me, I'll be very happy to take care of that. One, Daniel is now recovered. He was down with COVID in Croatia, in Zagreb. So he wrote to me saying he's now feeling better, and soon we will set a con call. So this is the one. And then, as I had mentioned to you last time, I was on a con call with Central European University in Brussels and Austria. I mean, they have 3 campuses: Budapest, Brussels, and someplace in Austria. So their director of media studies, I mean, they call it as Center for Media Society and Center for Media Digital Societies. Marius is his name. So I have briefed him about the forum, and I'll be writing a connecting mail this coming week. And then we will also have huddling with Marius, and he's a nice person. And I think since they are a university, there could be several other possibilities that we could all open up, which could be research, joint grant writing, maybe doing some programs together. And Central Eastern University, I mean, just to say it, was set up by George Soros. I mean, unless you would have some reservations with the man, you could probably think through, but this university was set up by George Soros in Hungary. Mm-hmm. And then there was some problem, and then he shifted the whole campus. I mean, he invested about $750 billion for setting up that university. But then there was some ideological problem in Budapest, and he has taken the whole campus to Brussels and Austria. So this is a brief background, but I have already briefed them about the forum, and they'll be pretty happy to huddle and talk and take the things forward.
Sure, just let us know when they're ready and we will follow up. Thank you very
I'll
much.
be writing mail to connect you and Mavis.
Sure.
And then we will take it on. And then Daniel is now fine with the COVID. He has recovered. So soon we are going to speak to him as well.
Thank you. Any comment, Eduardo? Any reports? Any?
I just wanted to comment on the Russian speaking thing. You were right, Greg. 50 was way off. It's 30% are Russian speaking.
I just looked. That's even bigger than I expected. So you were closer to right than I was.
All right. Well, it's an honor. All right.
So yeah, beyond that, I don't have much to report. Next week, I will be in a panel discussion for ICANN. That's on DNS abuse and ways to prevent that. And I have no other reports to give you. Greg, any comment?
No.
Anyone wants to make any comment? No? In this case, I wish all of you a wonderful week ahead, and I see you next week.
Absolutely.
Thank
Good
you.
week, everybody. Take care.
You too.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.